That's wild. I didn't even know she followed the page. All right, so we're live. So you see.
Okay.
And you'll see once people log on. This coffee is delicious, by the way.
Glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah. I've become more of an espresso person.
Oh, yeah?
Amazing.
Who doesn't like espresso?
Hey. Do you know Tiny... I don't know who that is.
I can't read it.
How y'all doing? Welcome to Woke Wednesdays. Kelshay. Oh, Kelshay's so cool. Tiny Ball of Rage. You know Tiny Ball of Rage?
No.
No? Well, welcome everyone. This is Woke Wednesdays. We do this every single Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Y'all are very timely people, so we always appreciate that. So my name, you know what's funny? And we'll kind of get into this when we talk about racism.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved to Miami, I started pronouncing my name as Herson, because that's like Spanish pronunciation. But
Yeah.
here, I would have never done that.
Yeah.
Right? We'll kind of talk about that. But yeah, so my name is Herson. I'm working on my PhD at Florida International University. Just started my second year of doc work. And I have the pleasure and the honor of having an amazing, brilliant, just beautiful person inside and out. Amazing guest tonight. If you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Seja Sawafta. I am Jerson's childhood friend. We've been through a lot together, and I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Oxford. I study Arabic literature with a focus on exile, intellectual commitment, and political dissent in the work of one novelist who was a rebel. So currently finishing that up.
So you're finishing your PhD. So when do you finish?
Plus or minus 6 months.
So,
yeah.
And she said Oxford University, y'all. That's a big deal. So thank you for making time, from hanging out with princes and princesses, and hanging out with us on Woke Wednesdays tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So I've known Suja since 8th grade. That's taken it back. I've known Suja for years, over 10.
Almost
15 years, 20, something like that. Yeah, something crazy. Yeah. High school, undergrad, studied abroad together, all that stuff. And now we're here, so it's a pleasure to have her on the show. So tonight we're addressing a big question. We're unpacking a huge topic that it's impossible to address in the span of an hour, but we're going to try our best to kind of get at it, which is what are some of the challenges and the issues that face the ArabAmerican community in the United States, specifically under this presidential administration? Huge topic.
It would be hard to kind of talk about specifically this presidential administration without going a little bit farther back to 9/11, which is actually the year, 2001 was the year that we met in school. So it was at that really tender age of like 13, 14 when that all happened. And I think that's the kind of the beginning of scapegoating of Arab and Muslim Americans more broadly in the United States. So I think the racism and the challenges that have been facing these communities at large, because you can't just say one community, there are intricacies there that we really have to address. But I think all of this has been at play for 16 plus years, even actually longer than that because of the first Gulf War. And but it's kind of been magnified with the recent presidential administration, and some of the challenges are just, if we just put it like down to basics, it's just trying to fight for our place in American society, and proving that we're just as American as everyone else, because that's always the question that people are tossing at us. It's like, are you American? Do you feel American? And if we think about what constitutes being an American, it's such a broad thing.
Broad question.
But
it's interesting that you said trying to kind of establish your place in the United States, because I would even add trying to establish your place kind of in the world.
Yeah.
Like on a global level, the United States is a powerhouse. So images that they legitimize, justify, produce, and reproduce ends up being disseminated to the rest of the world. And people sometimes buy into this discourse, this logic, stereotypes, and everything that surround.
Yeah.
And you said something, too, that it's not just like a Palestinian thing. This is Islam, the Muslims, just on a global level.
Anyone who could pass as Arab.
Yeah.
So even Sikhs, South Asians, anyone from really the global South who has brown skin, who's ethnically ambiguous. Those people have been just as, bullied. And so it's definitely a very trying time for those people. And the irony of it is those are some of the most successful Americans. Those are some of the people that are at Harvard, Yale, all the Ivies, all the public Ivies, and even if they're not at the Ivies, they're at schools that are, they're making a huge impact in those communities that they're in. So it's really interesting that a community with so much intellectual and cultural capital is being stigmatized to this degree in 2017, almost 2018.
No, I mean, you're absolutely correct. So we could start so many places within this conversation of what are some of the challenges that kind of face the Arab American community. Real quick, just kind of like to I think provide some context or just kind of define some words real quick.
Yeah.
You said earlier that Arab community entails a lot of people. It's comprised of many. Real quickly, can you just kind of give a quick kind of like definition of that, maybe?
Okay, so the term Arab is becoming more problematic today because there are a lot of Arabs or people from Arab countries who are questioning whether or not they're actually Arab. So the term Arab, or the self-fashioning of being Arab, is actually currently can be applied to 22 different countries that are members of the Arab League, all with very distinct cultures and dialects of Arabic. So they're not really, there will be regions within those 22 countries that have cultural proximities to one another, but they don't necessarily they're not, think of Latin America.
I was just about to
so
say, yeah.
It's that kind of, each country has its own history with colonialism. Each one has its own ancient civilization. And just different ways of implementing Islam and Arabic within its societies. So broadly speaking, you can divide it. North Africa, so Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, and Algeria, of course, are known as the Maghreb, which is the western part, and it actually, latitude-wise, extends farther west than Spain. Morocco actually extends farther west than Spain, so this question of east and west is really put into question there. Then you have
North Africa,
then you have Egypt and Sudan, which used to be a kingdom together. You have the Gulf countries, the Gulf Cooperation Council, so Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain. They kind of function as kind of within regional and cultural proximity to one another. Yemen is by itself, but it is the mothership, so it's the origin of the Arabs is from Yemen. And Arabic came from there and kind of dispersed with the coming of Islam and Arabized non-Arab people. So the Moroccans, for example, weren't,
that's
Arabs.
a whole nother episode.
That's a whole other episode. And then we have the Levantine,
Yeah.
so very quickly, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, and we have Iraq. So those are kind of the sub-regions that we could talk about, but each of them have their own distinct histories, dialects, food, traditions.
And I want to ask you a quick question. And real quick, I see a lot of like new people getting on. Welcome to Woke Wednesdays. We have an amazing guest, scholar, amazing person on the show tonight. So if you've never joined or tuned into Woke Wednesdays, feel free to ask questions. Post your comments. What are you thinking about? Do you agree with what we're saying? Do you disagree? If so, why? Please let us know your thoughts. If you have any questions for Suja, Suja is extremely insightful, so smart. So any questions that you have, we'll try to get at them.
With those comments.
I'm being honest. But yeah, so real quick, it's interesting, and we're gonna get into this is interesting because something happens similarly with Latinx folks, Hispanic people, whatever you want to call us, that people become Latino or Hispanic when they come to the United States. Right? Someone becomes, this is like a verb. It's constantly a form of becoming, right? And they don't become an American, maybe on paper, but socially, they become a Latino. They become a Hispanic person. Do you think that's similar, like when it comes to like the Arab community, that they embody now a certain type of cultural, maybe cultural labels or categories when they come to the United States?
So, broadly speaking, in the Arab world, I think there are people that would argue there's this thing called PanArabism, which means that the Arabs ultimately, at the end of the day, their fate is tied together in some capacity just because of the way that cultural centers and media centers work, and also just the history against colonialism. They still have that kind of brotherhood between them. But it's interesting because I would argue that someone would probably identify first with their their nation state, and then when they come to the U.S., they're put into a broader Arab community and are then labeled Arab American. And so for first generation like myself who were born here, I'm Arab American here, but I'm the American cousin back in Palestine. So it's really interesting to code switch between those two identities and have to kind of justify, or I guess reevaluate my identity depending on the context in which I'm placed, and you know which culture I'm really working with at the time.
Absolutely, you're getting all the hearts right now. The hearts are blowing up, and I think that's a great point. And it's interesting when we talk about political alliances.
Yeah,
we rarely hear like a Hispanic community coming together in solidarity with like an Arab community in the United States. I don't really think I've seen that. I've seen maybe like a post, like, you know, on Instagram or something, but like real political alliances, like we don't see that often. In like the way you're explaining things now, I'm like, wow, that's the same thing that I feel when I go to Nicaragua.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, that'd be so cool, like to have these strong political alliances. I think that could be extremely powerful.
Absolutely. I think it depends on the state. I will say, like, California is ahead of the curve when it comes to intersectionality with struggles.
They've always been for decades, yeah.
But I think that our generation, first generation Americans, we're trying to form those community ties with other minority communities, and sometimes we have to explain to our parents, you know, not my parents, but you know, just very broadly speaking, some parents, they don't know like the things that we have in common with other first generations, because it's not within the same cultural context, but the struggle is the same. So being bilingual and having to somehow eliminate that native language that's within us because it makes certain Americans uncomfortable, or you know, that kind of thing, or just being brown and not being able to pass as white or whatever else is more mainstream. And I say this very loosely. I don't actually identify with these kind of markers, but yeah. So I think it's definitely up and coming, and things are changing.
No, absolutely. Even when it comes to talking about these like identifiers, that's a whole nother. There's so much.
I know. There's so much to unpack.
There's so much to unpack. Yeah. All right, so let's get at this question. Challenges that face the Arab American community. We went to the same high school. We grew up in the South. Right, the colloquial South, North Carolina, the Bible Belt, right, North Kakalaki, and we went to a predominantly white high school. Our high school was interesting, different social classes. For the most part, kind of racially dichotomous, like very white, black, and then just kind of other.
And we were in the other.
We were in the other. So did you face any type of like challenges, like? Not academically, like that's like part of a separate conversation, but like just like socially, specifically because of being just Arab.
Yeah, for sure. I think at the time it was my sister and I, and maybe 2 other Arab Americans, and they were Sudanese. So again, when we're talking about like Arab cultures, we didn't really have much in common with them because they're more like Afro-Arab. I remember his name was Khalid Khalifa.
Okay.
But he wasn't like within like the groups that we hung out with. But yeah, so Afro-Arab culture is very different than Levantine Arab culture. So I mean, it wasn't like we were close to like the other Arabs.
You would be Levantine?
I would be Levantine.
Okay.
So those are the Arab states that have cultural proximity to the Ottoman Empire.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting experience. I kind of found myself navigating this space between I gravitated towards just the more like kinder and more like curious folks in school, but I didn't necessarily feel like I fit in anywhere, except for our French class, which was probably the microcosm of diversity within the school.
You're so right.
Yeah. But I don't think there was any other instance where I felt like I could tell people about being Palestinian and they would know what that was like, or tell them about, you know, the fact that people would say things to me like, are you related to Saddam Hussein? Or is Bin Laden your cousin? Like after 9/11, those were the questions that people were tossing at me. And I was like 14, 15, you know, and I just remember coming home from school and being like, oh, Mom, somebody called me a suicide bomber today. And I don't know what to do to make them see that I'm like just like them. I'm a kid, you know, or I'm a teenager. So it was very challenging to make my Arab identity mean anything more than hummus and falafel to most people. And
what does that mean?
So the foods that people love to eat, hummus and falafel, and like, you know, our food that everyone's obsessed with now. That was the only thing that people...
Part of my American accent. I was like, hummus.
I said
hummus
it the Arab way.
and falafels. Okay, gotcha.
Falafels. So it was a challenge.
Recently you posted on Instagram, I think it was a picture of you playing lacrosse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think your caption was like, you know, I'm just now posting this, kind of like it was a post of empowerment.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that like, a little bit?
Yeah, I was I was one out of 2 people of color on the lacrosse team. The Page lacrosse team was predominantly white. And I'm not an athlete, I'm not a very athletic person, so I joined the team as a novice. I was learning as I was part of the team. And it was one of the few teams in school that allowed students to kind of try out and just join the team without having prior knowledge of a sport. So I thought that was my chance. I was really excited about it. And the coach, we had 2 coaches. One was very understanding, and he was one of my closest friends in high school's father, and he was great. The other one just would be so racist towards me, and he would see me struggling to run the mile every day during practice, and he'd be like, don't throw up on me, don't do this. And it was only always directed towards me.
Yeah.
And I was constantly marginalized on the team by him, not by my teammates, I have to say.
And maybe some sexism.
Yeah, it was just
right?
a horrible experience. So I actually stayed on the team for 2 years, and then I decided my senior year I was just going to cut all the negativity out of my life, because I was, we were becoming adults. It was a formative year, and he begged me to join the team. He came to me in the hall once, and he was like, please join the team. You're like the only person that like we really need on the team for diversity purposes.
Wow.
And I was like, well, honestly, you made my life so miserable that I don't want to be part of this team. Yeah. And then he was like, can you manage the team? Yeah. So you know how students can manage?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm sorry, coach, like I'm not interested in being part of this. But I think just me staying for 2 years, I wanted the physical challenge, which I wouldn't really have gotten outside of that. Yeah. But I also just wanted to prove a point that I'm not a quitter. And a lot of the things about my high school experience were very challenging. So it was just another thing to add to the mix.
Yeah. So Utter Kayla's saying lacrosse of all sports, was it created by Native Americans? Right? So it's that we're culturally appropriating the sport.
Right. And then marginalizing students of color,
right.
Who are on the team. It was me and one other African American girl, and we had a Jewish student as well. But I don't know if she identified as white or non-white, so I'm not gonna,
No, yeah. And one thing I think that, as we're kind of looking at your stories and your experiences, is that in a way, like your childhood was, your innocence in a way was kind of, you were robbed of it.
Exactly.
Not only by your counterparts as students, but also from your teachers, your administrators, to the point where the only safe space you had was an elective course.
Yeah. Where the teacher was Arab American.
Yeah, exactly.
So our French teacher was Tunisian American, and he was the only place that I felt like my first intellectual spark kind of ignited in that French class.
Yeah.
Incidentally, learning another language, and in learning another language, picked a part of my identity that I chose, rather than one that was imposed on me by the environment I was in.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And now, and to kind of reconnect with you after all these years, I mean, we've been friends on Facebook too.
Yeah.
But I'm so happy just to see where you are now.
Thanks, Jers.
Just kind of when you juxtapose that to the experiences that you went through.
Is that CV?
That is Christian Bryant. Yeah, that is Christian Bryant. Welcome everybody. We're just tuning in.
Sorry,
we have an amazing guest tonight, addressing so many issues, challenges facing the Arab American community. But I think it's important to kind of start. It's so interesting. A lot of people of color that I know that go into doctoral programs or graduate programs, a lot of their work ends up being around people of color or things that they can directly identify with. Right. So, I'm doing stuff around race and education. Right? You're doing stuff around Arab communities, right?
Exile. Being marginalized.
Being marginalized. Like, we end up going into this work because it seems like it's something that we can directly, kind of affiliate with.
Right.
And it's the world we kind of live in, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Chris is saying, what's up? What's up, Suja? Glad you guys connected. But so this is great. So now violence can come in many ways, right? I don't think you would need physical I don't know. Well,
I wasn't ever attacked physically in school, but I was bullied to the point where I started thinking like a politically engaged adult at 13, 14. And I would give presentations on Palestine because that's where my parents are born there, So I would give presentations on Palestine in front of a class of people who had no idea what it was and like what was happening. And I mean, some of them really were curious, but I think the majority just didn't know and didn't care. When I look at my little brother now who's 12, I'm like, you know, I'm so happy to see that he's able to be a child and enjoy like the innocence that comes with being younger, because I at his age did not have that at all. Because when I was his age, it was like a year before 9/11. And it was, you know, the Bush administration. So I've always been very aware of my political environment, and I think I give credit to my parents because they're the ones that made me woke. But they kind of just explained my identity in a way that was very organic. So I never had to question what being Arab was. I never had to say, like, I don't get it. I knew it. And I was fluent in the language. I mean, I still am, obviously. But, yeah, so
then you did your undergraduate work at University of North Carolina in Greensboro, UNCG, shout out. And then you did your master's work at Carolina, Chapel Hill. And we were kind of talking before the show that you were very connected, you still are very connected with the ArabAmerican community. Now, something happened recently, a couple years ago. I don't know if you kind of want to talk about it.
Yeah, sure. So the Chapel Hill shootings, I am close friends with Dia Barakat's sister, Suzanne. I've known her since 2006. I've known the Barakat family in general since 2002, but not specifically that particular group of cousins, but their cousins. I've known Suzanne for a long time, 10 plus years. My sister, who's younger than me by 6 years, is within the same age range as Dia, Razan, and Yusur. And so I remember I was in Oxford at the time, and I wake up, and everyone has texted me, like, I hope you're okay. I hope you don't know the people that happened. Or, like, I'm sorry if it's someone from your community. And I'm, like, thinking, oh, my God, what happened? So I knew it was somebody that I knew, but I wasn't, when I opened Facebook, I had no idea which names were going to pop up, what faces I was going to see. And I saw the graduation picture from Razan's graduation just a few months before. And
so they were students at Carolina.
Students at Carolina and NC State.
Undergraduate students.
Within our community. I mean, their families are extremely generous. The kind of people that open their entire house to every student. Like, come eat. Come, you know, break your fast with us during Ramadan. So it was this I wasn't here, but I had to make sure to be in touch with my sister at the time, who's their friend, and just kind of stay connected. But it was very emotionally scarring for all of us. And when I came back, there was that void. Because to think that, you know, your friends are sitting in their apartment and someone literally barges in and shoots them, execution style, it's probably the most morbid thing you would ever have to visualize.
Yeah.
And we're still dealing with that as a community today. We're still seeing their parents and having to just be sensitive about what we say and, like, try to mourn them, but in a way that honors their legacy and what they stood for. But yeah, there was a direct impact on our community.
And can we give a little bit more context? I don't think everyone knows necessarily what happened. I don't know. I was in North Carolina, so I mean, everyone in North Carolina knew about it or heard about it. I'm not sure how many people outside of North Carolina really heard about it. I don't know, right? News can sometimes be kept local. So it essentially was Arab students in their apartment. Dia
Barakat it's still hard to remember that they're gone. Dia Barakat was Syrian American. Razan and Yusur Abu Salha were Palestinian Jordanian Americans. And Yusur and Dia had just gotten married. They had a neighbor in housing close to Chapel Hill at the university who was bullying them all the time and making racist and lewd comments. And Yusur actually expressed to her mother that she was feeling unsafe and she didn't know how to win her neighbor over. And her mother told her, just give him time. Show him who you really are. He was a white man. He's a white man, white supremacist, gun enthusiast, and atheist. And so she was encouraging her to just treat it like him the way she treats anybody. You know, just once he sees who you guys are, he'll open up and things will be better. And they didn't ever think that he would knock on their door one night and shoot all three of them, the sister and the couple, literally 6 weeks after their wedding. So they were just starting out in their lives. UNC dental students, very dedicated to community. So it was a bit of a shock and, just a very violent kind of intrusion on the community.
And this is just like one example of a challenge that faces the Arab American community.
Right.
This is just one example.
Yeah.
This is an example of violence, and I hate that. I hate that a thing like Woke Wednesdays has to exist. I hate that this stuff we even have to have these conversations. I hate that these things happen and they exist. But this is, I think, people need to know and understand this stuff is real. It's not, and these are this person who committed this act of hatred, right? Probably never met an Arab person, right? And people tend to do this a lot. I hear this a lot with anti-LGBTQ folks, anti-anybody folks. Oftentimes they don't really know anyone of that community.
It's based on a preconception.
Preconceptions that are disseminated through media, whatever, so many places, right? And you were talking about 2001, we saw this just spurge of movies coming out where every person, and if it was a terrorist attack, it was someone who was Arab. Yeah. When we know that most of terrorist attacks that happen in the United States are committed by white men. Yeah.
But they're lone wolves.
They're lone wolves, something's going on with them. Yeah. So, okay. So let's kind of like try to move on from this. This is tough to talk about. So what, you're doing your work around exiles. You're dedicating your life to this research and all this stuff. Yeah. What are some of the, what are some of the challenges that you see right now? Kind of becoming more explicit, more in our faces with this current presidential administration?
Just the blatant ignorance that is being spewed on television day in and day out, and the fact that what people like to call the leader of the free world, this title that's constantly tossed in our faces, is someone who tweets anything that crosses his mind, and quite frankly is not an educated human being. Is literally the personification of male ego gone wrong. And someone who just doesn't know how to say, I'm not actually qualified for this job. That's my personal opinion. It's like he's going out there and using, so I think one of Trump's, like, I guess what people claim his assets or his charm is that he keeps repeating words. And it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic.
He's a demagogue.
Yeah, so it's like it's appealing to people who aren't used to engaging with intellectual terminology or political terminology. And so it's like finally a person I can understand, right? But we're literally within, literally a year of this election already having a Muslim ban. People are impacted, those who are dual citizens, so say you're Libyan and American, and you want to marry someone who is, I don't know, Libyan but British also. You have to actually think about whether or not you can have your wedding in the United States, despite the fact that this person has a British citizenship, because they also hold a Libyan passport. So, I mean, we're talking about real families that are being impacted, with just like the simplest, like, I want to have a wedding. Why do I have to think about whether or not my in-laws can come to this country and have a wedding with, you know what I'm saying? So, I just think it's everything. It's like we were taking 2 steps forward only to take 10 steps back. But it's not, free will. We're being slammed back into the corner, which I think is just so frustrating. And I just have to keep hearing people who are privileged that don't acknowledge or understand that they're privileged kind of talk about, like, I mean, I don't want to say that it's a specific race or whatever, but it's anyone who's privileged who doesn't check that privilege. They'll say things like, now that I know you and your family, I would defend you people. You people, like, we're Americans. My father's been in North America for like 30-something years, and has contributed more to American society than most people who were born here, for example. Or my mother who immigrated here, but she's spent most of her life more of her life in the United States than she has in Palestine at this point. Right. Or me I've been born here, I was born and bred, and yet somehow I'm those people.
Yeah. Toni Morrison said, she had a great quote about hyphens, about how anyone who's white is an American. Everyone else is something hyphen American. Yeah. So African American, Latin American, Asian American, Arab American. So oftentimes, especially like kids of immigrant parents, they feel like just the hyphen. Like, not even, you have the Arab, you have the American, and you have to juggle this. You're in this nebulous space where your identity is constantly contested. Right. And you're constantly trying to figure out.
You're negotiating it.
It's a negotiation.
I don't actually have a problem with the hyphen. I take huge pride in the hyphen. Yeah. And I am extremely proud, and I feel blessed to be Palestinian. But my problem is that this is a settler colonial country. Meaning that unless you're Native American, sorry to break it to you, you're not native to here, so you can't tell anyone to go home. Yeah. You know? And so one of the things we were talking about before the show is the construct of New American versus Old American. So newer Americans are people who are first, second generation. Their families came more recently. And that is mostly that kind of hyphen is used to describe people like me and you who are not maybe... You have European descent in you by default, but I don't. And so people who are not of predominantly European descent. Whereas Old American is someone who's been here since Plymouth Rock, right? So one of the things that I do is I don't contest the hyphen. I own both identities proudly. And I can't see myself as one or the other. I'm both. But I do make it a point to say, unless you're part of the Red Nation, sorry to say that you're also from somewhere else. So it's just kind of pushing back against this us versus them, or get out of my country or whatever. It's not your country either. You know? Sorry to be so logical, but it's just, it's not.
That's funny.
I mean, we're all complicit in this settler colonial project, unfortunately.
No, Spider Kill is saying that white people feel left out because they aren't hyphenated. Their culture isn't recognized, is what I was told. So they want to be recognized. Recognized every day. Through various ways. Kayla, I think you make a good point. Now let's if we can dive into a little bit of critical thought. Because here's the question. Okay. I keep on hearing you say there's this language around American, right? I'm an American. You know, my dad is an American. My mom, she's been here for so long. So there seems to be this kind of like affinity, or I don't want to say we're enamoring, Americanness, or a type of citizenship, right? As if that represents something, right? Because politically, at least on paper, it does, right? Maybe in a positive way, right? But so, what is it that like that makes you very like tied to this kind of like idea? That's interesting. I find that very interesting.
You know, it's funny that you say that because I don't feel particularly tied to it. It's more of just, I'm not a person who believes in borders. I am, you know, like I'm just the kind of, this world is too beautiful and we have too much in common to actually divide ourselves. But until justice is achieved, unfortunately I have to subscribe partially to these kind of notions. And I do care about this country. I mean, it's my home, right? Yeah. But what's the word? Like, it's just, there's so much that we have to unpack all the time, and we actually are poster children for whatever culture we look like, rather than the culture that we're bred in, or the cultures that we're bred in. And I think one of the things that I actually didn't touch upon is most Arabs who aren't Afro-Arab write white on the census. We're considered, Middle Eastern people are considered white. Yeah. And so all my life I've had to check this box, white, without ever feeling white. Without ever experiencing whiteness. And not that I want to particularly, but it's just an interesting category that I really just want everyone to break out of. But we also we're not eligible for minority scholarships. Yeah, so I don't know, this idea of Americanness, I think it can be applied in different ways, and it depends on who you talk to. But I think it's just the fact that it's so magnified in our society and in our media.
This is interesting. So I live in Miami now, right? And I've met so many people who are Latin American descent who identify as white, and it's caused me to look at post-colonial theory, to kind of learn more about Latin American history, and the way people are racialized in the United States, because race is very contextual, right? The United States has a way of racializing people, right? Different from other places. Right. So it's interesting in the way we conceptualize white, or even blackness, whiteness, because we end up, the discourse around it sometimes is conflated And we end up speaking about race or ethnicity as if whiteness or blackness can't be both.
Mm-hmm.
It can be an ethnicity in a way, and it can also be like a race in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But we end up kind of repudiating like the ethnic part of it because we can't identify with it, right?
Exactly.
But like the racial way, maybe because we are, or some people might be lighter, fair-skinned, but then we fall into the trap again of kind of making race into a biological construct, which doesn't make any sense.
I know,
right? We're getting like really late.
No, it's really we're kind of. But I think by like whether we want to admit it or not, I think that's going to change sooner or later because so many different types of Americans are mixing anyway. So the new American is emerging, which is someone who is mixed race. It's not going to be sustainable, I don't think, in the U.S. much longer.
I mean, so the new so Chris is asking, where does that census dynamic come from? Are you asking in reference to like Suja,
the white being Middle Eastern?
Yeah. Oh, look, Laura just got on.
Hey, Lulu.
Well, the new 2020 census is going to be different from what I understand.
Right.
There are more boxes to check, but even then, as if your humanity could be relegated to a box.
I think just to answer, CV, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So actually, the first Arab immigrants to the United States were Syrian and Lebanese, who tend to be. I mean, they're mixed. There can be people who look like me, but there are also people who are blonde and blue-eyed, and so I think they were predominantly Christian, and because of that religious affiliation, they were kind of housed under this white kind of European just it's interesting. It doesn't really mean anything, but it was just a decision based on convenience at the time, and it kind of stuck. So, and
we've seen this with different nationalities throughout time in different censuses and in different countries.
Right.
For example, Chinese people in Cuba, they had to check off white on the race box
because their skin is lighter.
Right, because their skin is lighter. But yet they were treated as blacks because they had to use the same facilities as black people in Cuba. They would marry black people in Cuba. So so the marginalized stick together. Yes, right. In many ways, right. It's interesting, yeah. So we can check the box, but then the box doesn't define you, right?
It doesn't. No, it really doesn't.
So that's a good question, Chris.
Thanks for that.
So we're talking about. Sorry, we've been going.
Too many different.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sense of thoughts. Yeah. Someone said you got me sipping this tea. We're actually not drinking on the show for once.
We're drinking coffee.
We're drinking coffee. I feel very kind of high class right now. But yeah, so these challenges, right?
Yeah.
That face. So we talked about a certain. We talked about the violence, physical violence. We talked about even marriages, how it affects the personal. What are some other things that we're kind of seeing right now under this administration?
Something as simple as your name being Ahmed, Muhammad, anything that sounds too problematic. You can literally be held Christian, Muslim, Jewish, it doesn't matter what type of Arab you are. If your name hits like a certain nerve with TSA, you can be in questioning for hours. What's the name for a Christian Arab person? Is it Assyrian? No, that's a particular sect, and also just a minority, mostly in Iraq and Syria. Oh, okay. So they're like kind of like Armenian, Assyrian, like that kind of thing. But it's a niche community, very small. Okay. What were we saying? So what is it that? So something names. As simple as having a name that just doesn't sound like it sounds like it could be a terrorist name. I mean, to put it point blank. Or just the fact that so many of this first generation, second generation Arab Americans, Muslim Americans more broadly, I don't want to exclude the Muslim Americans, which can be anyone, Russian, Bosnian, Chinese, African, Iranian, Turkish. Latinos, anywhere really. It's like so many of these people are driven by how much pain they endured in their adolescence, and so they want to be something and they want to make a difference and make sure that, and that's definitely what happened with me and certainly with you. So you want to make sure that the next generation is equipped with more knowledge and more empowerment than what we had to navigate. Yeah. So the fact is that most of my Arab American friends are, doctors, lawyers, engineers, or working on Wall Street and killing the game. Okay, we're talking like top tier. you know? Not that I think that's the only thing that matters, but they hustled. Yeah. So it's not that they came from rich families. They came from middle class, some of them lower class, and literally hustled their way to the top. And yet, you know, contributing so much to society, you're still being marginalized and othered and not valued for what you're bringing to the table. And having to just have people ask you, like, the silliest questions, you know, whether in terms of just basic geography, like, where is that again? You know?
Do you think that's a silly question?
I think it's... I lived in Europe. I've lived in the Middle East, and I've lived in the U.S. And, I mean, obviously the Middle East and Europe more recently in my life and in my adult life. But nowhere other than here have I been asked, for example, where Palestine is, the birthplace of Jesus Christ, okay? Yeah. Or I just think that in Europe, the average, not that Europe is without fault, they have a very violent colonial history, and that needs to be dealt with. But the average European, okay, knows 3 languages, 3+ languages, and they're actually encouraged to know, if you're German, you should know English, Spanish, and French, right? If not more.
I think geography also plays a part in that, though, because the countries are so close together, borders.
But they're still educated in a way to where you need to know about the world. Regardless of what that tradition is, whether it's Orientalist or not, you still need to know where things fall on a map.
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't think we have that emphasis in U.S. schools,
oh, we don't. At all. But it's not supposed to be that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what happens when people know about the past?
Yeah.
Especially in a country that's made, we're trained, I think, to be ignorant.
Exactly.
I think that is one of the purposes
pedagogy of the ignorant is what I like to call it.
Of
the oppressed.
Yeah. Paulo Freire, great work. Yeah. That's the book that changed my life.
That is.
But yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you.
And you as a member of the Latin community, when someone says, "Are you Mexican?" Doesn't that you're like, I'm Central American, you know, originally. That has nothing to do with Mexico. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I used to get mad at that. I used to get. I mean, you remember? I used to get so angry at that. But I don't get angry at that anymore. Yeah. And it might be like the educator in me now. Someone say something. Yeah, we are back. Okay, cool. I can see this. So sorry. I'm so sorry.
Technical glitch.
North Carolina, I tell you, we never had this problem in Miami. It's a North Carolina thing. They're not. North Carolina's anti-wokeness. That's what it is. So we're back, y'all. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. What were we talking about?
We got the Mexican thing.
Yeah, I don't think I can get mad at that anymore.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with you that people are completely uneducated and ignorant. But it's...
But ask the question, just ask it in a culturally sensitive way. You know, don't just be like, assume something. Ask me, you know?
I mean, I'm so with you. I don't have that much faith in people. Like, because sometimes people just don't know what's offensive or what isn't offensive. Yeah. And I've caught myself... When I have a question regarding gender, right, or non-heteronormativity, like, I'm very much ignorant to that knowledge and discourse. Yeah. So I find myself sometimes asking an ignorant question, or it might even be offensive, but I don't mean for it to be. So I'm starting to understand, it's like, oh, okay, like, I've never been taught this stuff, so how would I even know?
But even then, you would have the sensitivity to be like, hey, I'm really sorry, I don't know enough about this. This is where I need you to come in.
Now at my age, in education, but maybe at 18, I don't know if I would.
You're right. We're gonna cut y'all some slack.
But I completely agree with you though. Like in Europe, the education is just so much better than here. I mean, I'm so with you on that. Yeah. Absolutely. So y'all. So I think that people were having a whole conversation here. Oh goodness, I missed a bunch.
Oh man, y'all, the education.
Money hard, America, they work hard. Sorry, let's see. Is the feed having issues for anyone else? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
We're back.
All right, cool. So, sorry, we're back. We're good. Okay, so, I kind of want to ask you about kind of like the genealogy of this. You said this, we started seeing policies and violence, you said Gulf War, and then it kind of was emphasized or enforced more in 2001. Post 9/11. Can you kind of talk about a little bit what are some things that we started seeing when this first happened? Like, what were like kind of some, like, what was going on in the Arab American community? Because clearly it's not I don't know.
Unfortunately, I can't really speak to the first Gulf War because I was like, we were babies.
We were two, maybe
we were
three.
two, you know. But I can say that with 9/11 and the aftermath of that, and just kind of the fear, the general fear and sadness and loss that people felt afterwards, which I'm not downplaying at all.
No,
and I don't like comparative suffering, so I wouldn't say that like other people.
I hate.
You know
that.
what I mean?
I don't
like,
even see the point of that.
That's like the 24/7 of another. Yeah, it probably is, but you know what? Like that's not the point here. You know, the fact of the matter is like America was shocked. And or the United, I don't even like using America. I'm gonna backtrack. The United States.
No, I'm with you too on that.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm careful with that.
Yeah.
But we were in a state of shock, and the average person doesn't know anything about the Middle East. So there was just a lot of, I mean, there's always a scapegoat in America. There were the Irish, the Russians, the Chinese, the Italians, and now it's the Latin community, the Latinx community, and the Middle Eastern community.
The Black community has been scapegoat for centuries, right?
The main one, and solidarity. But it's our time now as like the minority scapegoat, and I think that it's really frustrating.
We welcome you. We have a club. Uh-huh.
I don't know who's left, so maybe we'll be the last.
We have a club.
I think we're done. But yeah, I think it's just the challenges was just kind of addressing the fact that yes, there is this identity ArabAmerican, and there are niche communities within that, but kind of like we're not all the same. We're not all Saudi Arabia. We're not all this. We're not all that. Not every Muslim is the same. Not every Muslim is practicing. Not every Muslim is extremist. Not every Arab is Muslim, and the majority of Muslims aren't Arab. So just those kinds of questions. I mean, there were so many different things that you had to educate on, and the challenge was wanting to live a normal life, whatever that means, but also remaining politically engaged within the broader community within the United States, and being educators and people who had to fight for our place.
Yeah. Here's a question, and I don't know if I'm going off topic a little bit, but I heard you say something earlier about Palestine, the birthplace of Jesus Christ. And I'm not asking questions about Jesus. That's for another episode.
Christmas was like 2 days ago.
Yeah, right. Oh my God, this is the last episode of the year.
It is.
Guest. Yeah, it just hit me again. So, you said Palestine. You didn't say Israel.
Yeah.
And when it comes to ignorance and lack of education, I think a lot of people
Yeah.
probably think those are two different parts, like two different places in general.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is. Would you please kind of, why do you call it Palestine, not Israel? What does that mean to you? You also said you're Palestinian American. Would you mind just kind of dropping knowledge right quick on that?
Yeah, I'm going to have to probably give you all a few definitions.
Oh, please do. This is WokeWednesdays.
So,
Go ahead.
I say Palestine because the place that I go back to visit my grandparents, my cousins, my family is Palestine. And Palestine is basically the name of the historical name of the contested land of what is today referred to as Israel, Palestine. Palestinians are the indigenous people of that land, so they are. Look at that, more light.
Look at that. Illumination.
So think what the Native Americans are to the Americas. That's what the Palestinians are to Israel, Palestine. Israel is a settler colonial state that was founded in 1948 with Jewish immigration to Palestine beginning in the late 19th century. So during the Ottoman times, into the British rule, and then after World War II, was established as an independent Jewish state. But the movement for Jewish immigration to Palestine began in the late 19th century due to the racism Jews faced in Europe. So it was a nationalist movement that argued that Palestine was an empty place, a land with no people for a people with no land, which was a false myth, obviously. So it was a colonial project, but it's distinct in the sense that it wasn't a colonial project that ended. It's kind of like the U.S. People came here and we took Native American land and we're staying. South Africa, the Afrikaners came, put the black South Africans in Bantustans, and kind of became minority rule, even though they're
a great analogy.
Majority rule rather than minority. Same thing with Australia, New Zealand, Canada. So those are settler colonial communities that completely ignore the presence of a pre-existing culture and civilization. And so that's what happened in Palestine. So the Palestinians were expelled from their homes in 1948, again in 1967.
You said expelled.
Yeah.
So Jewish people who came to Palestine, that they didn't necessarily have this intent though, right? Was this a because the United States was also involved in this? I'm ignorant.
So it was. There's a document called the Balfour Declaration, in which the British, so a Scottish man named Balfour, wrote that he supported the establishment of a Jewish state over Palestine, which was part of Greater Syria at the time. So Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Palestine were one big country called Greater Syria, and Palestine was a province under Syria. So they called for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine, but there were other countries that were in the bid. So Uganda was one, Argentina was one. There were multiple potential places for the establishment of Israel or an exclusively Jewish state. The reason Palestine was the hot commodity was because of obviously it being the home of the Abrahamic faiths and the birthplace of Judaism.
So which governments were kind of working this out?
The British are the ones that gave this declaration and handed over Palestine even though it wasn't theirs to hand over. The Americans were the first to recognize Israel as a state 15 minutes after like the Israelis said, we're Israelis, this is Israel, and it's the Jewish state. So I like to think of it as America's the father that gives the child support, but England is the single mom. So that's how it is. And so the Palestinians were expelled by militias in the 40s, and the irony is that the majority, some of them were people that came to settle in Palestine before World War II, and some were people that had just survived the Holocaust and in turn joined militias, and then were like, we need to just get the indigenous people out. So that's what the issue is at hand. And so Palestinians have since said we will be fine with 1967 borders. So rather than all of historic Palestine, which on the map is Israel, we'll be okay with the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which is less than 25% of the original land.
Wow.
And they're still being denied that right to an independent, viable state. So that's what's going on in a nutshell. In a nutshell.
People are saying, wow, like, give me a thumbs up. Yeah, I think that... yeah, it's like we're definitely not taught that in school.
No.
Right? Why would we?
I think it has to do with the fear of being accused of being anti-Semitic. And just
the United States.
The United States. It also appeals Zionism, which is an offshoot of Orientalism. So it kind of appeals to the evangelical Christian community within the United States. So there's this belief that if a Jewish state is established, the second coming of Christ will be expedited. And there's this complete ignorance of the fact that Palestinians were, religiously Jewish, Christian, Greek Orthodox, and Sunni Muslim, Baha'i, and Druze. So we have 5 religions, really, not even including the other minorities that were there. All of these people identified as Palestinian. The Jews were obviously absorbed into Israel. The Christians and the Muslims today in Palestine are still living together and are facing this kind of injustice together. But it appeals to a certain demographic here. There's the lobby, of course, which is very powerful. And I think that they don't want to be accused of anti-Semitism in a post-Holocaust world, to put it quite frankly. But there are a lot of intricacies at play.
You're saying that's the reason why we don't learn about it? Or you're saying that's the reason why they gave...
Interesting. No, the reasons are just deals, like political deals, because Palestine was promised 3 times. To the Saudis, to the Jews, and to the Palestinians, who's, it's their country. But, we could literally go on for hours.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of issues, but we're living in a post-Holocaust world where there's a lot of guilt. And so one of the ways, the attempts to reconcile that guilt is to say the Jews have a right to a state. But it completely ignores the fact that Jews within the Arab world, like Moroccan Jews, Iraqi Jews, Yemeni Jews, did not experience the Holocaust. And they were absorbed into a Europeanized kind of image of a Jewish state that they don't fit into because they're from Arab countries. So it's very interesting the way this is all playing out, but there's just a lot to talk about.
Mario is saying this is one of the more perplexing, complicated geopolitical topics.
Right.
This is a lot to unpack.
It's perplexing and complicated in the sense that it impacts millions of people.
Yeah.
First and foremost, the 12 million Palestinians in the world who are denied their right to a state or just access to the state. They can't even go back. We're talking about 12 million, roughly between 11 and 12 million Palestinians in the world. More than half of those people are in exile, living in refugee camps, living in Latin America, living in the U.S., etc. And then, of course, the people who are in Israel, who are from different political backgrounds, and anyone who feels passionate about the topic.
Absolutely.
But there's really nothing complicated about understanding that it was a settler colonial project that was unjustly.
And I don't think Mara means like that part is complicated.
Yeah.
But it's just politics is complicated, just in general.
Yeah.
Right, and then for your average person to even understand this type of the language we're using, right?
Yeah.
All the political just kind of negotiations that went through, and I didn't know that it was between Argentina or other countries.
Yeah, it could have been anywhere. It could have been the Argentinian-Israeli conflict.
Yeah,
it could have been the Ugandan-Israeli conflict. It didn't
I had
have
no
to be
idea.
Yeah.
Real quick, Instagram's going to kick us off in 3 minutes, and then we'll restart it. But Otterkill is asking, what's the P word? The Jews were being executed during the Ottoman Empire? Or I don't know if...
What do you mean the P word?
I don't know. I think you may have said something that starts with a letter P. I don't know. Kayla, do you mind giving us a little context? She's saying, long history somewhere in the mix. They were driven toward Russia and faced genocide there too, is what I read. I'm a little lost.
Are you talking about the original Jewish Exodus? Because the 3,000-year-old one.
I don't know.
So,
she said she's gonna Google.
Okay, Google it. Good luck.
All right, so Instagram kicks us off after 1 hour.
Yeah.
Just saying Jews. I'm a little confused by the question. Are you confused by the question?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. So Instagram kicks us off after 1 hour. I'm gonna end it and then I'm gonna restart it. So can you believe it's been an hour already?
It has been.
Yeah. All right. So we'll see you in a little bit.